السلوجن
can catch up.
can, you think so?
I think so, yeah. SpotPod.
SpotPod.
It's a
More than meets the eye.
Is that like actually?
That's part of the...
Okay. I think it can catch up. It's a bit of a tongue twister for people for whom English is not their first language, but it will be good.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But what about first language people?
No, it will be fine.
You sure?
It will be perfectly fine. SpotPod.
انت عارف بالعربي السلوجن ايه؟ هيعجبك. صحتك أمانة واهتمامنا رسالة.
الله.
ايه رأيك؟
الله.
لا بجد
I love it actually.
بدون Do you actually?
Yeah, no, I do. It's nice.
Uh,
It's not it's catchy enough without being too cliche.
Too cheesy?
Oh.
That's fair.
What's wrong with cheesy, man? Cheesy is good.
Alrighty, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to SpotPod. Without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today, because today's episode is a bit special. It's a little bit more than a bit, but I'll explain that shortly. The reason being is, not only is our guest today a dear and a close friend of mine, consider him a brother, but he's a person who takes things diligently and goes a bit further when it comes to academics. But beyond that part, the part that I want to get to is his resume is pretty impressive. Although that resume, we won't go through it today. And although that's something you can find out online on his website or read one of his books, I'll let you explore and do your own research for that. I'd like to give you a bit of a background. Today's guest is Dr. Andrew Youssef. And just like myself, he comes from an Egyptian background. He moved to Canada around the same time when I did, and he completed an undergraduate study, and then later on continued to get his PhD in theology. A bit of his professional roles, and don't mind me for looking over here, but because I couldn't memorize every single thing on the list here for you, but as of right now, he's a registered psychotherapy. He is qualifying in Ontario. He's a spiritual care practitioner in healthcare institutions. And remember that part that I told you about academics? Well, he likes to give back. So he's a teacher, a lecturer.
Well, currently I'm at St. Paul and Trinity, formerly at the Toronto Orthodox Theological Academy.
Moving on to his books, I'll link them in the video and you can explore it further. Oriental Orthodox and Veiled, Father God and Mother Nature. And obviously his work in translations is not ending, and I don't think it's something he would like to end anytime soon.
Not at all.
Not at all. If anything, probably adding another language. I'll let him divulge more on that. He has clinical experience, and that's in therapy, as well as chaplaincy, and various other therapeutical methods. But so that we can get to the fun part. Hi, Dr. Andrews. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Pleasure is all mine, and I can't believe that I'm introducing you so formally.
I know, it feels so weird.
Yeah. You know, if you go back in time, or anyone watching this video who don't know us, they would have never imagined this day would come.
I know. They wouldn't have, absolutely.
For reasons that could be mentioned and others that...
Let's keep them unmentioned for now.
Just for us.
Just for us.
Yeah. Why don't we begin with something fun?
Sure.
Are you okay with that?
All yours.
I jotted them down, and this is a little bit so that it goes with our theme. Okay. SpotPod, from the name Spot as in spotlight and podcast. And we are trying to shed light on the cause that is for this month, which is Alzheimer's disease. Mm-hmm. However, before doing so, we always want to send the message that every single piece of information that you learn, that you hear about, there's always more to it than meets the eye. Yep. And there's a very famous quote, which is something that we want to uphold as a theme for us at SpotPod. And let me know what you think of it. I think you might agree with me. The quote says that it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It is that you know that just ain't so.
Okay.
Sometimes the information that we know might be a bit biased, skewed, or you might have part of the information. Tip of the iceberg. That's where more than meets the eye comes from.
Yep.
And that could be the reason why you're going down the wrong path. You know, wrong diet. You're like, don't eat this, don't drink that, things like that.
Yeah.
So speaking of food and eating and making decisions and all of that, I'm going to ask you 5 different things. And you tell me which one Dr. Andrew Youssef or Andrew Youssef,
please,
the human, would rather...
as opposed to what? There isn't another species that I identify with.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Night owl. You wrestled a bit with that one.
Well, because a lot of my life now is not up to me with my son in the picture, who is, I follow whatever his schedule is.
Yeah.
So there isn't much free will in that department for me to choose,
Fair game. Yeah. He gets to pick.
Exactly.
A bird or an owl?
Yeah.
Book or podcast, since you're an author yourself?
Book. Yeah.
Old school all the way.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And that's why we were very fortunate to have him on this podcast. City lights or nature trails?
Nature trails.
Pizza or shawarma?
Shawarma.
Yeah. Hopefully we can get some of that right after.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So the whole purpose of this podcast is to glean a bit of insight on what you think on a couple of different topics. Obviously, I introduced you as you, the person, the human. But can you tell us a bit more about yourself? And can you tell us more about what brought you to this point? What made you be the Andrew Youssef that you are right now? And this will be the last time I'll say it. What made you Dr. Andrew Youssef?
Sure. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the academic journey, because I don't think anything before that would be relevant to what we're talking about today. So I actually started in the science field with you at kinesiology at McMaster University, good old days. Convinced probably every Egyptian that was in the program to go in that year into kinesiology, only for me to realize it wasn't for me and leave a year later.
That's brave.
And I'm glad you all have forgiven me for that. Just realized that it's not where I was. I realized that what I like most is actually more of a relational, theological kind of approach to things rather than a scientific approach, in terms of like sports science, right? And that's where I started religious studies, still at McMaster University. After that, I started my journey in doing masters in theological studies. So my undergrad was more of a generalized way of studying religion. So I studied a bit of Christianity, a bit of Judaism, a bit of Islam, a bit of Buddhism, and more generalized themes, like, for example, storytelling in East Asian religions, and things like that. Yeah. It was great, but then I wanted to specialize a bit more, so I did a master's in theological studies at Trinity College with the University of Toronto, where I did the Orthodox Christian Studies program. Essentially offers a master's with a focus on Orthodox studies. I finished that in 2 years, began my PhD in theological studies, and continued until I was done in 2024. Parallel with that master's and PhD journey, I started realizing there was too much in my head studying academic subjects and debating and it's all about really knowing how to articulate yourself, but also like sort of establishing intellectual dominance, because best about this particular subject kind of thing. And it's
you keep specializing till everything about nothing else.
Exactly, right? And I got too caught up on that. I realized that early on, and it kind of made me a little bit less human in the way I approach things. I was too focused on getting it right academically that I forgot about the raw human condition side of things. So I decided, I'm going to do something a little bit more pastoral. And at the time, I spoke to a friend, Bavli Cost, who was doing his. He was already he's done his master's in theological studies, he's done chaplaincy, and so on and so forth. And
further down the road, what you kind of wanted to go.
Far ahead of me. And I got on a call with him, and he suggested that I try out chaplaincy. And at the time, I decided, what, I'm going to try it out. I had no idea what it entailed, aside from I'm going to be in a hospital, and people are going to talk to me about stuff that relates to God, and I have no idea how I'm going to tackle it.
Yeah.
And at the time, a very generous supervisor, Reverend Ajit Verghese in Scarborough General, decided to take a chance on me. And he had absolutely no reason to take me on. So everybody in the program either did, a master's in counseling or a master's in pastoral studies or something related to that. I'm coming in with just an academic background.
At that point, you were where on your journey?
So we're talking 2019, I think, or 2018.
Just finish your undergrad, kind of in your master's.
Finishing my master's.
Finishing your master's, sorry.
Right, but nothing, pastoral at all, all academic. And he decided to take me on, and I fell in love with, doing pastoral studies and focusing on that as the main thing. I did 4 units of clinical pastoral education at the time, which is what you need in order to begin the certification process to be a certified spiritual care practitioner. And parallel to that, I realized that I want to do more than just that and kind of specialize more in this area as well. So while doing my PhD, I was doing a master in pastoral studies, now known as Masters in Psycho-Spiritual Studies, clinical pastoral education units. And I decided, I want to take this a step further. So I did the Master in Pastoral Studies, or Master in Psycho-Spiritual Studies, now it's known by that name, at Emmanuel College, affiliated with the University of Toronto as well. And that started my journey toward doing psychotherapy as well as chaplaincy. And that's how I'm here now. So I lecture sometimes. Yeah. I offer psychotherapy services to people who seek it sometimes. I'm occasionally in the hospital offering spiritual care. And between these 3 things and a son, I'm busy enough.
That's there's a very famous saying that goes, it's not what we know and it's not what we do necessarily that keeps us going. It's gratitude. And sometimes, to be grateful is the only thing that you can rationalize all these things that you have on your plate.
Absolutely. And I, thank God there's nothing I do that I don't love.
That's do what you love till you love what you do type of thing.
So I went through kinesiology and didn't manage to love it. And then I went through all the religious, theological, spiritual, psychotherapeutic, and loved it. And it was a lot of work. It wasn't always fun to do. There were times where it's like, nice, I have to cite all of everything that I wrote. And you know what? That is not exactly fun. But then when you see the value of it in your ability to be a scholar, your ability to be helping people, process traumas and process all sorts of behavioral issues they're struggling with, that is incredibly fulfilling.
I want to, obviously for the sake of time, and hopefully, if you accept, you could come back on again and we can delve into other topics. But for the meantime, I want to zone in on a specific part that you just mentioned. I like how you mentioned the academic part was the predominant approach for you earlier on.
Yeah.
And you realized, maybe I'm forgetting the human aspect.
Yes.
And then you went to do the clinical, can I say that?
Yes.
The clinical part, or the hands-on, for lack of a better term, to dumb it down, basically. And that's when you kind of found the nice yin-yang balance for yourself.
Absolutely.
The only reason why I want to focus on this is because I really felt that you would be an invaluable, your opinion would be very invaluable on this topic, because our focus today, part of the main focus is in September, they usually have Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And actually this very weekend is Alzheimer's Day weekend type of thing.
Okay.
On September 21st, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing about Alzheimer's is, for those people who know what it is, they know that it's synonymous with dementia, although it's a form of dementia.
Yeah.
And people would, if they have them in their families or they hear about them, like, oh, that must be tough because that person doesn't recognize you, or it could be as serious as not recognizing the other person, or as simple as a simple inconvenience. Where did I leave the pen? Where did I do this? What did I write? What did I tell you to do? And things add up, But a lot of times we treat it in the academics, or let's say if you're from a background that is scientific, you're thinking about it in terms of, okay, what happens in the brain, or what can I do? What meds can I take? Who should I talk to? But we forget about the human aspect.
Absolutely.
And I think that's when I was preparing this so that we can talk together. I had a bit of a timeline, obviously getting to know you, then getting to know a bit about your opinion on mental health and Alzheimer's, but then further down the road about how should we interact with them. If you're a caregiver, that's one, or if you are someone, let's say, God forbid, for those people who had to put them in hospital homes or in hospital, how should, maybe we have some chaplains watching, or maybe we have psychotherapists watching, or whoever they may be, they might be experiencing a lot of things, but not in Alzheimer's a bit. And that's where every step counts. And that's where the kind of the dignity of man comes in. So I would like to get your opinion on that, like that balance between both sides.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't be able to comment much on the medical dimension of things, but I think there's something to be said about how the world today is actually becoming more and more cognizant of how important it is to define the person by saying, a person with Alzheimer's rather than, an Alzheimer's patient. You're not defined by your disease. You're defined as a person, and then with that disease preventing you from, having this or that privilege that people that don't have Alzheimer's might have. So I think there is something to be said about that there is that sense in which we're starting to be able to see the person rather than just the disease. And there is value to that. And that's what's making, I think, a lot of people open to having larger discussions about the human dimensions of things. In our, scientific world, in our modern times, there is a temptation that some have to reduce the mind to the brain. Mind equals brain. But that actually was never the way the world saw, your ability to think and your faculty of thinking and memory and so on. They weren't just a factor of your brain, right? There was more to it. The soul, which is in Greek psyche, the word that, gets connected to psychology.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah. Psyche becomes psyche.
Psyche.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to be anachronistic, but back then, what it meant was not what we mean today by psychology. It was more of the soul, the immaterial part of the person, rather than connecting it strictly to the brain in its own right.
In its own tangible chemical.
Yeah. So like
state.
your identity transcends the, I don't know, half a kilo or half a pound that our brain is.
Whatever the weight is.
There is more to you than that one organ. Even there's more to your thinking and your ability to relate to others than that, just that organ. I'm not, of course, belittling that organ. That organ is vital.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that there's more to the person than that.
More than meets the eye.
Exactly.
That's where it plays out. I think the part that I was really curious about is your chaplain's experience. And can we preface it by a bit of a debrief? How would you define the role of a chaplain and who is a chaplain?
Sure. So the word chaplain has been used in so many ways in history, including simply someone that took care of a chapel. Hence, you became a chaplain, right? Now, that has nothing to do with the way it's used today.
Not at all.
You could
to an extent,
still use it. Universities, if there's a chapel, the person in charge will be called the chaplain. But most of the time now, when people refer to chaplains in a hospital, they're not automatically connected with the chapel. They're more connected with being with people and journeying alongside them. The founder of clinical pastoral education would refer to people as living human documents, and you are studying those instead of studying a book on anthropology in a dorm. Instead, you're in a hospital sitting side by side with a person who's experiencing suffering. And typically where we come in is when people are unable to make sense of the suffering they're going through, or they want to talk about how, why is God doing this to me? Why me? And often, of course, this is, coming up for a patient, but it can also be coming for the caregiver if it's a family member and so on. And what we do is that we come in, we sit down, and we predominantly listen.
Yeah.
There is very little that we say to people in terms of, telling them something or preaching at them. Rather, we ask them questions that help them dig deeper and become more reflective and introspective. And then we help them find their own way, making sense of the suffering that they are currently experiencing. And I think there is humility in that because, I come from an Orthodox Christian background. The person I'm talking to might be from, a Buddhist background or a Muslim background.
Completely different religion.
Yeah, like I couldn't, preach to that person about, how Islam makes sense of dementia or how, Buddhism makes sense of dementia or any of that. So I come in and I actually invite them to reflect on their own theology. Or, sometimes lack thereof. Sometimes the person does not identify with an organized religion, but wants to talk to someone that's willing to listen and, hear them out. And that's when we come in as spiritual care practitioners. Actually, now there's a movement away from using, chaplain because it's clearly Christian and it's connotation of the chapel.
Of the chapel,
right. So instead, they use now spiritual care practitioner or spiritual health practitioner or spiritual care provider or a variation thereof. Different hospitals use different.
Different terminology.
Different titles. But of
depending on
course,
where
it's
they are.
understood that that person is with spiritual care or spiritual health, and it's understood that's the person you go to when you're having some sort of an existential question about what's going on
Yeah.
with the particular battle that you're having in the hospital. And of course, there's spiritual care in the hospital, but there's also in the prison system, in the military, and so on. There are different contexts in which people can participate as spiritual care practitioners.
As you were saying this, what came to mind was I was watching a video on YouTube, and obviously that's the majority of people would search things other than Google.
Yeah.
Now there's a whole bunch of AI. I wish it was there when we were in undergrad.
I know.
Would have made our life a whole lot easier, but that's a topic for another day.
But we're probably smarter for not using it.
I guess that's one way
We
of
have
putting
to
it.
look for things and search for them rather than just type
Just
it out
like-
and somebody responds to you.
Somebody
or something responds to you.
I was reading a bit online, and watching that video made me search a bit deeper, and I noticed that the element, whatever, the origin of the word chaplain might have come from a specific root. Maybe that's how it began, but the idea behind it, and you use that word spiritual, is of a high importance. I later on found a study from Harvard Medical School, and I think it was about 3-4 years ago, and it said how the outcome of any psychiatric illness, along with soma or bodily illness, to use a different language or the origin of the word, has found better prognosis when it was coupled with spiritual or faith. They use the word faith.
Yes.
So Harvard used the word faith, and I'm gearing our discussion towards that a bit, just because in Alzheimer conditions, and later on we'll talk about this, or mental health overall, it seems that burden of the illness has a huge, far more devastating impact on the person who's facing it and the caregiver, and sometimes even the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way more than what you see in terms of, and to use just a quick reference, some Alzheimer's conditions lead the individuals to forget about food or forget to eat. So they end up being emaciated and being completely skinny, completely small and frail. Yet at the end of the day, that's not causing much issues. Thankfully, and grace to a lot of it, medical attention and institutions, they don't even fall down or break their hips or break their bones, but the mind is completely wrecked.
Yeah.
So I guess part of the initiative of SpotPod, I want to shine a bit of a light on that importance. And what would you say is the current practice, I guess, in some of these hospitals or some of these home cares? And what can, let's say, an individual sitting at home who's doubting, maybe, my mama, my grandma might be having a condition or two, or looks like she's heading towards some sort of a dementia. What can I do to facilitate that care or to lighten the burden?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. So let me just comment on the piece about the study. There are so many studies now that, give evidence to the fact that being a person of faith, being a person that engages in prayer, meditation, and so on, it's actually something that helps you a lot in terms of making a recovery, in terms of, progressing in the right direction. And in terms of not being too affected by whatever disease that comes your way. Of course, it depends on the disease, but there is sufficient evidence to say you're better off if you're part of you're participating in a religious tradition in some sense, especially the more, for lack of a better term, esoteric part, where you're praying by yourself and and meditating and so on.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, they did mention, and I forgot that part. They did mention the act of prayer or the act of meditating.
Yes,
made a difference.
So meditating, contemplating, praying
to a higher being,
and all of that. And there are actually some studies that were done where they put some nuns and like contemplative nuns, like Carmelites and so on, and they started measuring the brain activity, and there was a lot of cool findings as a result of that were there. And in the world of spiritual care and the world of psychotherapy, there is spiritually integrated therapies that integrate your faith in the process. So for some people, it looks like focusing on a particular mantra or a prayer or something like that, and you invite the person to keep repeating it and using it. Of course, it has to be controlled given certain conditions and so on. Sometimes it involves inviting the person to actually fully participate in their faith tradition. Typically when I have an Orthodox client, which I have quite a lot of those, in fact, most of my clients tend to be, they find themselves to be significantly more in a calmer state of mind when they're adopting and dedicating more time to the Jesus prayer. Now, of course, the Jesus prayer, the point of it is to pray and be in communion with God. It's not in order for you to be calmer. But if that's an outcome, I mean, great. Why not?
Why not?
Right.
Right.
So there's something to be said to the value of that. Now, in terms of what you can do if you're a person and you're in a hospital setting and there's a person with Alzheimer's and they're unable to remember people or and so on. Let me make this a little bit more practical using actual scenarios. So a very common reoccurring scenario is when you have a patient that around sunset is scared and exhibiting all sorts of behaviors that are not typically exhibited because they are worried about their son or their daughter who must be coming back from school and have not arrived home yet, and they have to go look for them. What's happening here is that the person is going back to a time when they were younger, where their kids were still going to school. Typically, that person, of course, their children are now working,
and they have their own homes, and they might not even be around.
Of course,
individual.
No, the worst thing you can do at that point is to, this particular time of day is called sundowning, and
sundowning. It's an actual thing.
It's an actual thing that you can actually read literature on that in relation to persons with Alzheimer's. And basically, what a lot of people would be tempted to do is to try to remind them of how actually your son is this old and your daughter is this old, and then you're challenging the reality in such a way that kind of scares them. Or
you're breaking the whole paradigm,
right? Or you're making them embarrassed. And there are better ways to go about this. One of them is in some long-term care facilities, they will ask the family to have photo albums and pictures available. And then, as a caregiver, when I see that happening, I tell them, okay, well, could you show me what they look like so that we can, we can look for them together. We go back to the room. And we begin the process of looking through the album. And it's like, okay, where is this? Oh, that's your son. Oh, where was that? And how was that event? And what do you remember about it? How did you feel at that time? And you keep going through the album until we get to the person's getting older, and it's more gradual.
So it's almost like instead of giving them a shock therapy and telling them, hey, this is reality, buddy. Sorry, excuse me.
But that's the thing. Shock is not therapeutic in this case. It's actually, if anything, it's harmful.
It's almost like it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, like you're at that point you're making them doubt themselves, have less faith in themselves. I would say don't challenge, just simply redirect would be the best way.
And then walk through.
Exactly. And the other piece about integrating the spiritual component, this actually takes me away from psychotherapy and chaplaincy and takes me to the first person I've met that had a very long struggle with Alzheimer's. And it was actually back in Egypt.
Really?
And it was not someone who was like related to me, like blood related, but they were like second or third cousins.
A relative of some sort.
In Egypt, the entire family is
to be,
and they could be, and actually, in fact, in that case, they're closer to me than a lot of people that would expect them to be
within the bloodline.
Within the bloodline. But at any rate, the point was, it was that lady who, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's for sure. And added to that was a diagnosis of paranoia and OCD. And what that usually translated into in real life was she'd be going around trying to close every door and every window over and over again to ensure that they are safe. She would cease to recognize her children who are trying to give her food because she's convinced that the food must be poison.
Poisoned or told.
So medication was also problematic.
Because you can't give them something that they're
doubting. They're already doubting you. They already think you're trying to kill them. So what that family did for a while was to, unseal the yogurt, essentially grind the medication, put the medication in the yogurt, then figure out a way of free-sealing the yogurt.
So that it looks
sealed. So she'd open it herself and be sure that, it's sealed and nothing's happening. And then toward the end of the night, they would invite her to start praying.
Oh.
And you'd see a completely different person, completely present, completely aware.
You would have never guessed it's the same person.
No.
Let alone even guess that they have that condition. Really?
No.
That's impressive.
Like she'd recite prayers from the Adbeya, the Coptic Book of Hours, and she'd say through them, like pray through them. It's like how? Of course, it's long-term memory, and you can have all sorts of scientific explanations for it.
Tons of explanations.
But I'm talking about the change in demeanor, in a way of being, and where this gets really, really highlighted is toward the end of her life, and on the last day of her life, and she's praying, and she stops at the part. It's kind of like she knew she was about to die. She had nothing beyond the dementia and just being incredibly frail and elderly, but she didn't have a condition to say that she's about to die or she's actively dying.
Condition, no.
She's not actively dying.
No.
At all. But on that night, she starts praying with them, and there's a particular passage in one of the prayers of the Agbeya, or the Coptic Book of Hours, where she started saying to the Virgin Mary, to the Theotokos, open unto me the gates of mercy. And I kid you not, she would repeat it like tens, if not hundreds of times.
She kind of paused at that and repeated it almost like she's very, sorry for lack of a better term, very conscious. Yep. Like she knew the action would be this, or but then
totally aware.
Wow.
And it's like
goes back to that study and all of these things that we were talking about.
It goes back to the fact that there is more to you than your brain.
Back to the origin of the word psyche.
Right. There is a mind. There is a nous. There is there is an ability to be, and I don't know if think is the right word, but an ability to be present and to be aware and to be prayerful, even if your brain, its abilities are somewhat compromised.
So far we kind of had a bit of a journey in our discussion, where our discussion took a bit of a trail that started off with the illness in itself, and how the importance of mental health, and how mental health, remember the whole movement of like mental health being very important, and it was on social media, and during the pandemic it was a huge thing that everybody spoke about, whether you were in the sciences, whether you were academic or not, everybody made it a huge focus of their lives. But of course we went from there, and we kind of spoke a bit about memory and how because every interaction we have, and look at how we began this podcast today. We said, remember McMaster, remember when we were together, remember the silly things we did and how far it's come. And it seems like life is built upon memories. Like if we say life is a building, the brick would be memories. And that's why I think it's so shattering when you see a family member, or you even, like you just spoke about your family member, and I don't know her. I don't even know what she looks like. But I felt like not only can I relate, because in my family, my great grandma went through Alzheimer's, and she was alive for 10 years without any memory at all. But it's a constant fear that is in the family, and it's a constant fear that is in a lot of families. That what would happen if my mama forgets? What would happen if I forget? Some people might go as far as saying that, even as young as people our age start saying things like that. We even joke and say, "Oh, I'm starting to forget," and we say it as a joke, but we also add the element of fear. And then we moved on to the caregivers and how much of a burden that put on. But I like the part, and if you don't mind, I'll repeat it again and tell me if I got it correctly. Maybe someone can watch this and try to do it. I like the part where you say, meet them where they are. Yes. You said it basically when you explained how you guys did with that family member, but also how you guys would do it at a hospital or at a care facility. And you know what? They might be worried right now in the year 2025 about something that happened in 2000 or maybe earlier than that. No, you know what? Just get the pictures or walk them through. If they're more of a linguistically adept person, then walk them through that, and you can see results with that. And I to share a quick story, my mom's aunt, she has a bit of, she lives on her own and everything, and she lives with her sister, but she has moments where she feels a bit anxious. So when you mentioned that, I kind of remember that, and how an anxiety sometimes reactivates her OCD a bit. And she goes around taking care of this and that and ensuring things are tip top, even though she just did it maybe 10 minutes ago. And I think being able to realize, hey, you know what? This is what I have. Don't freak out. Meet them there.
Yeah.
It's hard on the caregiver to do that.
Of course.
And I think that's where moving down the interaction strategies that you mentioned, and serving the dying, I was just wondering, what piece of advice can you give, since you define chaplaincy as someone who studies people rather than someone who's studying a book, comparing, let's say, an academic per se? What could you give as an advice to someone maybe who's in my shoes? Like maybe me years ago when I saw my aunt, mom's aunt, going through that, or yourself maybe.
Yeah.
What could you do that would allow you to kind of calm down, get your heart rate down a bit, so that you can deal with the situation? And what have you learned from serving the dying or meeting the dying?
Of course. So there's a lot to be said about this, but let me start, somewhere. And I think one place to start is, sure, the thoughts might be, well, not the thoughts, the memories in particular might be compromised, but the feelings typically aren't.
That's a very good point.
Right?
Feelings.
Yeah. So maybe focus on making that person feel a certain way that they can be inspired by, or that they can feel a certain way. So, for example, let's say that this person loved to listen to jazz.
Jazz, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, I love jazz.
Right. They might forget what their favorite band was, or their favorite, composer was, or whatever, but they will never forget the way it made them feel.
The way it made them feel will never be forgotten.
So you put that. If the person is, so far that this is not even in the picture, there's something to be said about what is known as the ministry of quiet presence.
Ministry of quiet presence.
Yeah, that's an integral part of being a chaplain. You just walk into a room, there's a person there. Of course, if you know what their faith background is, you're more than welcome to say a prayer, audibly or inaudibly, depending. But if you don't, you being there might be worthwhile. Remember a story from one of my supervisors who would, sit down in one patient's room, introduce himself. She wouldn't even make eye contact with him.
No eye contact.
Nothing.
Just
sit there for 5 minutes, and then get up, excuse himself, wish her a good day, walk out. And then one day, and he would come at a certain, he'd come let's say today, and then 2 days later, and then 2 days later.
A fixed interval?
There's
some sort.
Yeah, fixed interval. That's the word I'm looking for. Forgive the lack of sleep.
Can't blame you.
But the point is, he missed one of these intervals. And that's when she turned to him and she's like, "You didn't come."
Really?
She was aware.
She was aware of it.
And she needed that presence, even though she said nothing.
She told him that on the time when he appeared.
Right. The ministry of quiet presence is far more important than people think.
The ministry of quiet presence.
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that you can offer to your loved ones. Without, you don't have to be doing something. We're not human doings. We're human beings. So if you're able to
I love that.
If you're able to sit and be, do that.
That's a great reminder.
Right. And then the other thing is when people are upset because, they are, when there are times where the way the disease manifests itself is that it comes with certain behaviors that are unwanted or that are more aggressive. And they're like, oh, like what, I'm coming and I'm trying to be with them, but they don't even remember me. And they, and they even snap at me.
Snap at me, yeah.
Like, is that what
Especially
I get?
if it's a family member,
right? And it's like, is that what I get for helping and serving that person? And it's like, actually think about it for a moment. Pause, take a step back. This might be the only chance this person could say no. Right? You've given them the agency to say no. That's actually one of my favorite parts about being a chaplain as opposed to anything else on the medical team.
Yeah.
So if you're a patient in a hospital, a doctor walks in, you can't kick them out. A pharmacist walks in, you can't kick them out. A nurse walks in,
they have to do whatever they're in there for.
A social worker walks in, you can't kick them out. A chaplain walks in, you can't kick them out. And if you do,
to fulfill their
you, in a way, like as a chaplain, especially when you're still young and you're still starting, you're like, oh, this sucks. Like I was just kicked out. I'm unwanted. But actually, wait a moment. You are actually wanted. Sorry, well, you're not wanted in this instance, but I guess you've given them something already by virtue of being kicked out, because you've given them the agency to say no to something, and it's probably the only no they get to say this week.
You played the role, you allowed them to play the role of free will, almost.
Exactly.
Which is a gift that is given to man.
Absolutely.
Human being.
Right.
You could
And
say.
you've just opened the door for them to have that opportunity that they couldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah.
So why not? I mean, I know it feels rough, and I know it feels like a rejection and all of that. I think outside of being with your loved one who's suffering from Alzheimer's, if you're a person who's, going through the journey of taking care and offering care and so on, is to take care of yourself. Compassion fatigue is real. Burnout
Compassion
is
fatigue.
Real. Yeah. I mean, you can't dismiss these things. You can't try and also, fortunately, there's that sense of spiritually bypassing things. It's like, oh, I'll rely on God and God will help me through. Yeah, sure.
That's the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
Like, there's the medical side of like, yeah, the drug will do it, the science will do it, or it's too late. There's the side where faith works, but sometimes you go a bit too far.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, like, God will provide grace and I'll be able to get through this and it will never be a problem. Well, God will offer grace, but God also granted you the gift of the mind. God granted you the gift of the ability to discern where your energies will be dedicated. If you're dedicating all of your energies to somebody else, that you are spending absolutely no time taking care of yourself, first of all, you're going to burn out, and then you are neither helping yourself nor that person to the capacity that you can help them. So I'm not suggesting, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that people cease to be dedicated to their loved ones and to their service and all of that. There is beauty in that, and there is eternal reward for that. But at the same time, there is reward also in taking care of yourself. I mean, if you're a person of faith and you're spending your entire time dedicated to taking care of a person, that you've completely forgot about your relationship with your Creator.
That's
right.
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
You've missed the opportunity to channel kind of the grace of the Creator toward that person, where oftentimes the caregiver is the person through whom the patient will be able to access grace. But then you've cut yourself off in a way from God giving you that grace. So are you really helping the person in that capacity? So I think it's really important that people exercise a reasonable level of compassion toward themselves when they are wondering if they're doing enough or not. Probably you are, if you love that person and you've dedicated yourself to their service and so on. And I think the other piece would be to remember that, there is something to be said about it being okay to get extra help, be it through having a personal support worker or through asking a friend or a loved one or through using a long-term care facility. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially if it's enhancing the quality of care that your loved one is getting. It's not you copping out. It's you actually trying to help them more and more.
So it's not a cop-out.
It's not.
Unfortunately, there's always this, again, and I know we began the topic and it's a repeated motif,
yes,
for lack of a better word, that yin-yang, that balance. And a lot of times when we look at service here in the West and we compare it to the East, there's always that yin-yang also approach where, you know what, no, you're depending on the medical system. You're not doing anything versus, no, you know what, the medical system is evil versus. So it's kind of like, it's a bit confusing.
And there are cultural dimensions to it.
The cultural.
There are cultures that will say, I'll leave them in the care of somebody who knows how to actually take care of them.
That's the best way to take care of them.
I'm going to take a step back. Well, that person can help them with the activities of daily living, but will they give them the pleasure of seeing their child or holding their hand or, maybe, but not always. And it's not the same as your own child or your own flesh and blood. And so
there are arguments to both sides.
Right. And then there's the other extreme of the cultures that say, oh, I will never throw my father or mother away, that language. And it's a very disturbing language, almost. It's aggressive. I'll never throw them to a long-term care. You're not. You're actually preserving them and caring for them in a long-term care home if the facility is good. And you're giving them opportunities for socialization with people that are in a similar situation to them, rather than them being around you and being constantly reminded that everyone around them is able to do X, Y, and Z while I'm unable to do that. But if it's a mix of caregivers that are able to do X, Y, and Z for me, but also, my friend Bob and my friend Berta that are, here, that are able to do certain things, but not everything. And, we're all trying to get by and talk to each other.
Working our way together.
Well, there's help to this. The social component of healing is also important, right?
It's it makes you wonder a lot of times which one is right. But I guess, as you said, is kind of, you have to kind of look at the equation that you have and see where the balance sheet tips,
right?
And add a bit more on one side if it's lacking versus the other. And this brings us to the next part, which is the theology of dignity. And maybe to keep it a bit more broad for the sake of people who might not know the terminology. Now that we've established somewhat of a nifty understanding on the human side of what does a person with Alzheimer look like, or a person with memory loss would look like, what is it like to see that person incapable of doing anything? Or to use that terminology that you just mentioned, a lot of times we're both from Egypt, and we know that that's a common place where I'm not going to throw my family in that care center. We tend to say that.
Yes.
Even, no matter how long
you got it from.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, and in case you haven't noticed, Eureka, that's where we got it from.
Yeah.
Another part plays a role once they've decided, okay, I'll take care of them, I'll be with them. And then they sit with them and they realize, you just mentioned there is power to that quietness around the person. But I think unless you're trained to do that, and I use trained a bit lightly here, you're faced with another roadblock, which is that person in front of me who seems to me right now completely void? There's no substance to them per se. When I talk to them, first of all, they're losing weight. They don't look the same. Yeah. Second of all, they're not taking care of themselves. They're acting a bit odd, for lack of a better word. And now I can't have a discussion or a dialogue. I know that there is these tactics that you just gave us through an album book, quiet practice, and all of that. But how can I make peace with the idea of, does that person still have dignity? If I am not, and I use dignity in two folds or two aspects. For those who want to practice religion, or those who have a God that they look up to, does he still approve of them? That's one side. And then the other part is, and I know that's a bit of an archaic look, and there's a bit of a controversy on that, but the other side is there any use for that person in my life? That's unfortunately, I guess, to play devil's advocate to the argument that we just said, I'm not going to throw that person away. That's one side of saying, well, you know what, when they're there and I go and I meet them, go and I see them, what value or what use are they playing in my life?
I see. Well,
you can unpack it however you want.
I'll
unpack it in your way.
Yeah, I'll answer this from my perspective as an Orthodox Christian, rather than, I can't speak to other people's conception of God. I certainly think God looks at every human being with an insane amount of love. And I use insane very intentionally, because that's actually the language of St. John Chrysostom, who speaks of God as the manic lover.
The manic lover.
He is.
God
doesn't just love you. God is crazy about you. You're the object of his love. And the thing about God is, God doesn't change. We change.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look at us.
Right.
Over the years.
So, sure, that person has changed, but God hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed.
And if God was in love with that person since day one, God is still looking at that person with the same amount of love. And you can't simply think that God has ceased to do that, right? From a theological perspective. Of course, people's thoughts and feelings can come up and they come and go and so on. But that's also a good place to remember that your thoughts and your feelings, valid as they may be, they're good friends. They're not good guides or leaders, right?
Your thoughts and your feelings, they're not leaders. They're not your...
or you're feeling it doesn't mean that's the truth, right?
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
That's your interpretation of things as you're experiencing them, maybe, but it's not an objective reality, if you will.
Good
So
reminder.
that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is, if you're equating dignity with use or utility, well, then maybe you can make an argument to where that person is and so on. But in Orthodox Christianity, the dignity of the human being is there from conception all the way till afterlife, which is indefinite.
So it never changed.
It doesn't change.
It only had a beginning because that person had a beginning.
Yes.
That's what.
And what makes a person have dignity is that they are in the image of God. And there is, to use what is more of a Jewish term, but, kind of fits with the Christian understanding, is there's a spark of divinity in that person. Just a spark, just
something that is above that person.
Yes. And
that stays, sorry.
And that stays in the person. That's always there. And a person is like the image of like the idea of image and likeness. There are different, of course, interpretations of it and so on and so forth. But there's something to be said about the fact that dignity is about being in the image of God. It's so my child that needs a diaper change has complete dignity, even though he depends entirely on me to change his diaper or his mother. That doesn't change his dignity.
His dignity is the same when his diapers are full as it is when it's empty.
Exactly.
Right? Sorry to get into too much info.
But it's all good.
Yeah.
But the same applies to a person, whether they're able to, go to the bathroom or not when they're older. That doesn't change.
It's like a full circle, basically.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But the point is, at the end of the day, the person's dignity comes from them being the image of God, not from what they're able or not able to do. One of the things that it's a little bit more of I guess, an academic approach, but we can get to that too, since we've been talking about the pastoral long enough.
Yeah.
Saint Gregory of Nyssa speaks about how there are certain things that are considered essential properties of being something. So human beings, for example, have certain essential properties.
Oh, essential properties that define them.
Right. And one of these, at least in Christian theology, is rationality. Right? Which proves a difficulty for a lot of other theologians other than St. Gregory of Nyssa. But St. Gregory of Nyssa makes sense of it by saying sometimes the person who belongs to the human nature, their hypostasis, their person, will have certain things that prevent them from fully showing and exhibiting that rationality that essentially belongs to them. So, for example, by virtue of being human, I might, I'm considered a rational person. My son, who's 7 months old, he belongs to human nature, and therefore he participates in rationality. But by virtue of his hypostasis, his person, having a brain, for example, that hasn't completely developed its fullest ability, he's not, showing that rationality enough, but he is essentially rational by virtue of being human. And the same applies to the person who's at the end of their lives that has lost, this or that cognitive ability that comes from their brain. It doesn't make them any less of the image of God. They are still the image of God by virtue of being human, and that gives them non-negotiable dignity. There's a danger in the language of dignity being a thing that changes depending on the circumstances. It's an infinite value, at least from an Orthodox Christian perspective. It doesn't change, and that's why our faith does not subscribe to any sort of a theology that allows for there is more dignity here or less dignity there, and that's why you find an Orthodox,
situational. Sorry,
right. Yeah. So I mean, the Orthodox Church, based on that kind of theology and other factors, of course, wouldn't allow for something like abortion or something like MAID. Why? Because dignity is not circumstantial. It doesn't matter how small or how able or unable a person is. A person has dignity, and it's infinite, and it's linked to the infinity of God rather than the finitude of the person.
Finitude of the person,
right,
in his current or her current situation.
Absolutely, yes.
You reminded me of something a bit, and I think those who are about our age would probably find it simple. But I remember when I was younger and I first heard of it, or heard that story, I was very mesmerized. And it was the story of like picking out a $10 bill and then looking at it and being asked how much is that worth? And it's worth whatever it was inscribed on it, whatever the the ministry decided to write it for. And then he crumbled it up and said, how much is it worth? And it was still 10. Threw it on the floor and stepped on it, put it in the mud, and excuse my language, put it in the toilet, and it was still the same. If you needed to purchase something for $10, you could still do it with that same element. Obviously, bear in mind the difference in analogy and examples, but I guess the situation that the $10 went through did not change its worth or value.
Absolutely.
And I like how you explained it in a way where you were able to kind of compare and contrast beginning of life, end of life, and how a lot of times, because we're used to being programmed, and if you look at your phone and you take your phone out, you're used to, okay, I'm here, point A, I'm going to point B. And the more closer I am to my destination, the less I have to worry about the journey per se. But in reality, life, and I guess that goes back to the whole purpose of why I was very intrigued in talking with you about this, is because that humanity aspect or that faith element that not only have you been practicing and exemplifying and doing it both at home and outside, but society, scientific research, hospitals here in the West, as much as has been in the East for years, obviously because of religion, has been practicing. They've been showing its importance, its value, and it's not, back to the analogy of the journey that you're on. It's not a specific spot that you put on your Google Maps that you're like, okay, it's almost done. I don't have to worry about it. I'll turn off my Google Maps because I know where I'm going. You know what? Oh, this person lost his memory. Yeah, he's almost done. Let's put him in let's put him out of sight, out of mind type of thing.
Yeah.
And to bring it back and for the sake of time, obviously, I like how the mind, how you explained it early on, and I want to focus on that one more time, is that, you have that spark of divinity, but when you are approaching that person, whether it's direct bloodline or not, and you're caring for them because you're a caregiver, you're a son, you're a mother, you're a chaplain, you're a psychotherapist, you're a medical professional, or even you're a pharmacist where you have to give that treatment, whatever it may be, you have to remember that, God gave you what he gave them, or you're a human being, and you're in that state, the same state that they're in, but they might not have these little memories that they were there, but that interaction you're giving them a chance, you're giving them an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And if you're there in that presence, what was that approach you said? Like that quiet therapy?
The ministry of quiet presence.
The ministry of quiet presence. Yeah. I think it hit me now. Like I think I understood it a bit more as you were talking, and it's more so when you're quiet, you're allowing that person who might be, for lack of a better term, again, missing certain characteristics or certain rationalities, to experience that rationality through you per se, or vicariously.
As you say that, I'm reminded of something in the training of chaplains, and I think everybody should kind of borrow a page of that, is that we're always invited to reflect on our theology and how it informs our practice. Right? So we don't have that divide between theory and practice. We want to integrate more.
Integrate it.
Right. So, when it comes to that, it's important to figure out what your theology of being human is and your theology of God is. And I think for me, for example, as an Orthodox Christian, I see it through the lens of, St. Paul in the letter of the Philippians, where he completely keeps on saying, in Christ, in Christ, in Christ. Now put that in dialogue with the Gospel of John, where, Pontius Pilate says about Jesus, behold the human being, behold the man. Ideo anthropos. Anthropos being the human being.
Anthropos, right, is the word for a human being.
Yeah, so it's, look at that human being, and it's amazing because that is being said while Jesus is completely destroyed by pain. He's been scourged by 2 Roman soldiers with a crown of thorns on top of him. He's been mocked. And then, if you were to encounter Jesus and on his way to Golgotha now, would you think he has dignity or no? Would you treat him with dignity or no? Right? That's a question you're going to ask yourself. And now think about the fact that everybody, to a degree, is participating in suffering the way he did.
Suffering is inherent to humans.
Yes. To be human is to suffer and die, right? Like in the 2nd century, there is a letter of Barnabas that says human beings are earth that suffers, right? We are earth that suffers. And
the origin of the word humus or whatever it was.
Humus, yeah, like earth. And that's the word from which human comes. Right? And you think about it and you're like, well, what is the common experience that every human being has gone through? It's death.
That's the one thing that everybody unites at.
Right. So with that in mind, having that theology, you look at a person and you see an icon of the crucified Christ. And you deal with them accordingly. At least for me as an Orthodox Christian, everybody will have to figure out what their theology or way of looking at human beings is like. And you look at that person and you're just like, behold a human being.
Behold a human being.
Christ. Right? Because everyone, knowingly or unknowingly, can be seen as in Christ. And then you are there with them, helping them, being present for them, whatever it is. And you're trying to, remove, if only one thorn from the crown of thorns in order to help them with their suffering. But, I remember vividly an experience I had in a hospital. It was this patient who is in his 60s, who is about to be taken off life support. And his mother is alive in her 90s. The mother and the son are people of faith. And I was called in.
At that point, as a chaplain?
I was a chaplain intern or a spiritual care intern. And I come in and there's nothing to say at that point. There's nothing you can say to console a mother that is losing a child at that age. Not that the age matters, but she's frail already. She's barely, able to stand on her feet. And this is exacerbated by the suffering of her son, who is about to be taken off life support to pass. And I remember vividly how I held both their hands together in mine and I started praying with them, the Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23. And I remember being there, being present, offering, to go back to the ministry of quiet presence, and then making my way back to the spiritual care office. And one of the spiritual care practitioners, so we all have, our toolkits and what we can do. So you'll have the person that, plays music and the person that does art therapy in addition to spiritual care and the person that has this gift or that gift and so on.
The flow is there.
Right. So there was someone there at the time who had, coloring pencils and a piece of paper. And I like to draw and paint.
Well, yeah,
So I took a piece of paper from the printer and I started drawing one of my favorite icons, which is the icon of Behold the Man, or the icon of extreme humility, where Christ is depicted with his hands tied. There is the red robe. He's been scourged and he has the crown of thorns and he's looking down in extreme humility. And I started I'm just doodling essentially. And I start drawing Christ in that position, just his face looking down. And he's usually depicted with a crown of thorns. And I depicted him, but I removed the crown of thorns.
Removed it.
And I just had it without that. And, the preceptor that was there that gave me the crayons to work on and so on. And she's like, oh, interesting. Like, why this? I was like, well, in the original, he's suffering. But what I did here is I just removed the suffering as much as I was able to, even through art.
Through art.
The truth is, when you're actually with a person as a chaplain or as a spiritual care practitioner or as a caregiver in general, even if you don't have training, that's going to be incredibly difficult for you to, remove the suffering. But what you can do, at least to use Christian terms here, is to be a Simon of Cyrene.
Simon of Cyrene.
Right? You carry the cross just a little bit for that person, or you help.
Simon of Cyrene is the person who, along the journey of Golgotha, the Dolorosa, carried the cross halfway through before heading to the.
When I say that, I mean more in the sense of, in the Passion of the Christ, where it's more like he's supporting Christ and carrying it rather than carrying it
than actually carrying
alone,
it. Yeah,
right?
that's true.
There is that sense of the artistic interpretation of that. But I'm not going to get into that. The point is...
Yeah, that's for another day. I was clarifying it for those who might not know who
Right. The point is
arenas.
you're able to alleviate the suffering if temporarily by just being present.
Mhm.
That at least that person doesn't have to go through it alone.
Alone.
You're there with
that
them.
in itself is
Yeah. Or you're just at the foot of the cross, like John supporting, Saint
on
Mary or Saint Mary Magdalene. Well,
I was taken back by, but it, positively speaking, obviously, by the usage of your different expertise in the story. And I'll tell you what I mean. Obviously, one way I wanted to introduce you, but for the sake of those who know our dynamics and we're really close friends, I think I would have gotten a beating after, but I would have called you the man of many hats. And the man of many hats. And I say that because because he has a lot of different skills and a lot of different experiences, but I say that because you pretty much more or less since I met you till now, you developed whatever you could develop and you added more to it, but you tried to keep whatever skills you had. So you always used to paint. You didn't get rid of that, and you tried to use it. And I think there's we can take a page out of your book from that part, and perhaps we can make it more. And I'm only saying the story right here to kind of make it a bit more relatable. The story that you mentioned about Christ and how you can look into your life, look and see who are you. Ask yourself. Sometimes know thyself, right?
Yes.
As the ancient, anybody who did a bit of psychology would know, philosophy, sorry, would know about that question. So know thyself. Ask yourself, who are you? Who am I? And try to give yourself some credit. Maybe today, someone might argue that I didn't give Youssef enough credit, or someone else might say I gave him a lot more credit than I should have.
I agree with that.
But see, it depends. It depends on who you ask. But I'm saying, put on the lens of your mother, and look at yourself and say, you know what? Maybe not really your mother if you're Egyptian, because Egyptian moms tend to like.
What are you trying to say, right?
It's only funny because it's true. He laughs because it's true. Sometimes mothers give more credit than theirs do. But I guess let's go back to that. Put on the lens of your mother and look at yourself and say, you know what skills do I have? Who am I?
Yep.
And remember that, you're a human being. You exist before you do. And that in itself is good enough. I mean, it was clearly good enough for scientists and humans and psychologists and philosophers and historians to label us that, but also it's good enough for God, for those of you guys who are religious, at least. But also the part that I want to focus on is look and see how many hats you may have in your closet. You'll be surprised. To use Andrew Youssef's example, that I really liked it. You love painting. You've always loved it. And I remember when we were even in kinesiology in science before, and I know you absolutely hated that. You still painted. Yeah. And I think that made your suffering a bit less,
Right. So it helps you process. It helps you, detox. You're focused on one thing rather than a million things at the same time.
And you never know. Here's the part where I want to transition it. You never know where you can use that as a caregiver, or as someone who's taking care of someone with Alzheimer's or with memory loss or dementia or OCD or anger issues. It doesn't matter. The list goes on with mental health. And you can use some of the things you're good at to make you feel at peace with caring for that individual.
Absolutely. You can always use it to take care of yourself, because you have to. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane and they tell you, you have to put the mask first before you help the next person put their mask on.
Yeah.
It's not because you're selfish. It's because if you try to help them, you're not going to get to do it before you actually collapse from lack of oxygen. So you have to put your oxygen first to help them put their oxygen.
It's funny that you mentioned this, and I prefaced this whole interaction.
You're flying in a week, right? I hope that we're not jinxing it.
We're not jinxing. Oh yeah, I hope not. I'll call you then. I need help. But I was referring to the part my mom absolutely loves this analogy or this story. She always goes back to that story, and she always goes, "Okay, remember, on an airplane, you'd put on the mask first before you help someone else." Maybe the take home message is, at least for me, and maybe for the audience as well. You know what? Take care of yourself. Dig deep and look. Who are you? It's okay if you don't have an answer to that question. Yeah. As you could probably tell us
to find out what that is, right, and what that entails.
But along the line, you can find that maybe you're good at a couple of things. Don't give up on that. Use it, because you never know when it might come back. You might come back in the room after you've taken care of someone.
Right. Absolutely.
You know what? If you're down for a quick, fun interaction,
sure. let's maybe
complete. Let's wrap it up with this.
yeah,
Let's wrap it up.
we end where we begin, you know.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you know, you got to start with fun, end with fun. Playing on words here, but complete the following sentence.
Okay.
Feel free to not even silence. Speaking of silence and quietness, is an answer. Okay. I'm gonna give you maybe 3 or 4, and feel free to throw something back at me.
Sure.
You've earned it by now.
Okay.
The hardest part of my work is.
I'm like as a caregiver, as a psychotherapist and a chaplain.
Yeah.
Well, psychotherapist qualifying.
Qualifying in the meantime. But by the way, don't forget, I'll have the link to your website, which has your books, has who you are, as you know, in case I didn't do him justice, which I think I didn't.
You did plenty.
and then also has links to different things that he's qualifying for and services as well.
Sure. So the most difficult part would be, a few years back I would have answered with self-care, but I think I've kind of managed to figure out my way of taking care of myself. I think now it would be a bit of finding people that understand what it is that we do, especially in the context of hospitals, where a lot of people have no idea what a chaplain is. Like, is it the same as a psychotherapist? Are they different from a social worker? Are you like, is that person a priest or an imam or a rabbi? Of course, we don't have to. Like, I'm a lay person who's a chaplain, but the average person doesn't know what that entails, right? So I think what I would say to this is the most difficult part of my work is people not understanding what it is that I do.
Yeah, what role do you play?
Right.
Which chess piece are you? Type of thing.
Exactly.
And mediator, I liked what you said that early on, is a good equivalent for chaplain. The most beautiful lesson I've learned from a patient is. I know you've learned a lot of beautiful lessons, and you've shared them already.
It's so hard to narrow down to one.
But what could be one insight that you would share with someone, let's say, that you've...
Honestly? I mean, of course, there are many, but I'll say this. There is something to be said about the people that teach you when they are no longer able to teach you. The person that's no longer verbal, but then surrounded by loved ones that cannot stop sharing memories and lessons they have learned from that person that's nonverbal, that's not there, that's probably actively dying. In Orthodox Christianity, we say, may their memory be eternal, or memory eternal for short. And it's real. I mean, theologically, it's more of the person being eternally in the memory of God. But I mean, in our day-to-day use, it's in the sense of, it's in the sense of your memory can be eternal, even if you're unable to share your memories. Others can share it for you, and therefore it will be eternal for us in our human experience. Kind of like the way our Jewish brothers and sisters would say, may their memory be a blessing about someone that passed.
Someone that passed. I love that. Yeah. If I could whisper one thing into every caregiver's ear, it would be. I know you shared a lot of. You are enough?
Yeah, you are enough.
It would be, you are enough. Love that. I never leave a hospital room without. And I'll follow with another part, but if do you...
Well, I can be facetious and be like, without sanitizing my hands, but...
You know what? It crossed my mind, I won't lie. I was wondering if you'd say that or not, but something's never changed.
In a way, remembering to, be an intercessor, saying a prayer for that person, saying a prayer for myself, hoping that, through that little prayer on my way out, that whatever deficiencies I've had, that God has made up for them with that person.
It will all work out for the good.
Yeah.
Honestly, one last thing to wrap it up.
You said there's a follow-up to that one.
There was a follow-up, but if
you might as well do it. I mean, I'm told, but it's okay. Just
no, because you know what? I'll tell you what the follow-up would. What's one funny interaction you've had that you would take with you everywhere? We say it in layman terminology, take to the grave, but but let's talk about the living for now. You would share with your son, you would share with you probably shared already with your friends and family members. What's one funny interaction you've had that you would never part way with?
In the workplace, you mean?
In the workplace, you know what? for the sake of this being hopefully a first of maybe a second episode or so, in your journey to your now, let's say?
Well, I think the funniest thing is how much I thought I knew exactly what I was going to do. Because, like, I walked into kinesiology knowing that my game plan is to get into med school, be a doctor, practice to pay off my student loans, and off to the monastery, be a monk.
Okay, how did that turn out?
And like, look at me
Yeah.
now. I became a doctor through having a PhD, but I'm not a physician or a medical doctor,
Mhm.
obviously. I ended up working in a hospital like a doctor, but as a chaplain, not as a doctor, as a chaplain.
Which is something you didn't want to do even as a doctor. Bear that
Right.
in mind. Yeah.
Yes. I was definitely like the guy that was going to have a clinic and not
And
go
then
into
leave
a
it.
hospital or anything. Yeah. And then, I thought that I was going to just be strictly an academic. That part continued because I became
Yeah.
an academic and did a PhD in theology and have been lecturing, but that's literally the only part that continued
That's the
from
only
there.
thing that kind of
Got married and had a child.
beautiful wife
Hopefully
and
the first
beautiful
of many.
kid. Amen. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yes. And with that, that's a wrap up. Is there anything you want to share with the audience, with us, other than the beautiful myriads of lessons that we can probably play
No,
over
like,
and over again?
my gratitude for you to bringing me over and
Pleasure is all mine.
having me share all of that with you, and hopefully you don't spend a lot of time editing this and
I'll have
cutting
fun with
all
it.
the parts and making sure it's concise enough and all of that.
No, thank you for allowing us to come together. And although, just for the sake of the audience, a bit of a personal part, because we began with the personal, went to the bit of the clinical, went to the theological divinity part, and then we wrapped it up with the community impact a bit. Honestly, Andrew Youssef, and I won't say doctor in this part because the human part, the friendship, the brotherly part, has always kept his home open, way before even getting married. And after he did, he kept that the case. And I never thought I'd meet a cooler version of Andrew till I met his kid. And I want to say, you know what? Thank you for allowing me to experience that. And I hope, whoever gets to watch this will get an opportunity to hear this part that I'm about to say. If in case they don't hear everything, they hear this part. Go ahead and go upside out and get to see, and maybe there's something you can learn from it. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And hopefully we were able to bring that home, shine a bit of a light on the cause that we're here for, Alzheimer's disease. September is the cause for that. Earlier this month, I ran a marathon for that cause. It was my first marathon ever. I didn't know how it was going to work out. I ended up limping for a couple of weeks, but hey, c'est la vie.
God bless you, man.
Now I don't limp. So a lot of things that the caregivers experience might be for the duration of the life of that person. And it was, again, back to something Andrew Youssef said, it's partaking of that suffering that matters. Whatever background you come from, whatever language you speak, there are many languages that would vouch for that. Whatever religion you may have, at the end of the day, partaking in that suffering has a sweet taste. In English we call it bittersweet, but it goes far beyond that. And
Absolutely.
till the next time, thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Andrew Youssef, for being on here.
Stop calling me that. Thank you, Dr. Carlos.
Alrighty.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.